university,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To get to receive your MBA. Just if you could just speak a little bit, how's a former punk rocker, army ranger, a go getter,
Yeah.
find yourself at an Ivy League institution pursuing an MBA, and then what what did you take from your time in the 75th into that study program, the work ethic, problem solving,
Yeah.
communications, whatever it was. How did that work out for you?
Yeah, man. Well, it ended up working out perfectly, right? As everything in life does. And but that kind of in between when I got out and went for my MBA, there was about 4 years in between that, 3 or 4 years. So during that time, it was very hectic. A lot of like we were growing a family, right? I have 3 kids by the time I started the MBA. Still married. I was working full time, and I was struggling with the transition, right? So physically, my body had just completely given up. A lot of pain trying to figure that out. Um, again, trying to find my tribe and my people again. Had a lot of PTSD issues, and that's sort of what's swirling around. And in the meantime, I'm also feeling like disconnected from purpose. How do I reconnect to that? And I thought, well, the natural progression here is I've learned how to be a leader in regiment. Let me go be a leader in the corporate world. And so that process began, right? And it took a while. That's why it took so long. It's because getting into an Ivy League MBA, especially, is a whole process, right? And it just takes time. So by the time I got accepted, I had put a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of money into getting to that point. And I was still kind of ignoring all of this other stuff that was starting to grow, and I'm trying to bury it down, but man, I'm running out of dirt to bury it with. Uh, so I found myself at Cornell, which even to this day I look back, oh, I'm not really sure how I did that. I must have sold it pretty well. Uh, and it's kind of a theme, right? I've always looked at like, well, what's the push thing? What's the stretch? I'm gonna at least shoot for that. Right? That's what got me into regiment, and that's what got me into Cornell. And and the whole way, I was never ready. I didn't quite feel like I belonged. Right? That imposter syndrome creeping in is one of the things that I help people with a lot, right? Because we all have it. It's always there. Every time you grow, every time you stretch yourself, you're going to experience that in some form again. But I my head down, started grinding in the program, and slowly realized that, hey, I'm a really valuable member of this team for a lot of different reasons. Right? I bring a lot of things to bear. And it was a really incredible experience.
Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today my guest is Nick Devlin. Nick is a former Ranger, former punk rocker. He joined the military a little bit later in life, at the ripe old age of 29, which to a lot of people isn't old, but if like kind of like professional sports, once you get past 28, 29, 30, you start getting old in military years because they're kind of like dog years. Nick served honorably for I think 4 years. Is that right, Nick? And then
That's right.
got out, went to school, went to an Ivy League institution, and we'll get into that and talk about that. And he's currently, kind of like Chris Farley, is in a van down by the river, driving across the country, and we'll talk a little bit about what he's doing now and where his path in life has taken him. But I'm gonna pass it off to Nick, let him introduce himself, and we'll get on with the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Yuma. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. I appreciate the invitation to share, and I haven't quite found my river yet, so that's part of the exploration. I'm in the Southwest, not too many rivers here right now.
That's right.
Uh, but yeah, so you know, I just started out big. My big dream is to wage peace on the world and uplift humanity. So I'm a transformation coach for high impact leaders, anyone with a desire to build a legacy of meaningful impact. I help them eliminate the drag and optimize every area of their life so they can move faster and love every minute of the journey. So my motto now is that life is an adventure, but it wasn't always that way, right? So I'll start with just a real brief story of 10-year-old Nick. I'm over at my friend's house and we're playing GI Joes, and his mom came over, and she was kind of anti military, and she was like, well, why don't we call them adventurers instead of soldiers? A 10-year-old boy, I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? So uh and so fast forward to me just growing up and getting into life. I went sort of the typical route. I went to college, got an engineering degree. You know, um, After that, I went to work. It was like, if this, then that, right? Every step led to the next thing. Well, I got my degree. I may as well go get a job. But I really wasn't. I wasn't thrilled with any of these big decisions I was making, right? And just kind of going through the motions. And so, you know, this chain of events just started to unfold, and I finally found myself after a few years out of college, like really uninspired, looking for like something that was more meaningful. And I had always wanted to join the military. Can come from a sort of a family of military. My grandfather was in World War II, First Marine Division, and always admired that part of my family history, and so had always wanted to join the military. Well, for whatever reason, it didn't happen until much later in life. And during that time, between 17, when I thought I was going to join originally, to 29, I was just kind of drifting, right? And I didn't really have a bigger vision for my life. And I kept choosing safety, right? Safety, security, control. I realize now that I kind of had this pattern underlying everything, that was the world is unsafe, right? So it meant I had to be really smart, I had to be tough, I had to play it safe. And in doing that, what I recognize now is that I was sacrificing my authenticity, right? My deeper desires, my uniqueness, and my happiness. And so, all of this was starting to unfold in my life, and I ended up joining the military at 29. Loved it, right? It was everything that I had hoped for. I was looking for big challenge, looking to really test myself. Also, kind of looking for somebody to just tell me what to do, and I'll go do it. Right? I'll go execute. Um, because I had been so lost for so long, and I wanted to be around the best of the best. So I just at that time saw a Ranger regiment. It's like that's my target. Um, and so this was all well and good, right? I had finally found something. Then I got out, and we'll dive more into this. But it's just kind of the the highlight reel, right? When I got out, I was immediately disconnected again from purpose, from a high performance tribe, or and I went back into this like directionless kind of going through the motions. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get my MBA. Went and got that. That again was sort of this if this then that kind of pattern. I got into the corporate world. Well, 6 months in the corporate world, totally hit a wall, burnt out, marriage on the rocks, physically in terrible shape, mentally in terrible shape. And the big aha at that moment was that I had never had a grander vision for my life. Right. So that the saying is, if you have no destination in mind, any road will get you there. And what that had created for me for most of my life was this massive sense of anxiety. It's very distracting, right? Not having this grander vision. And so I knew at that moment that I had to shift my approach. And the only thing I could connect to really was I need to live my life with intention. So that's like the biggest thing, if this whole podcast cuts out,
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I want the listeners to hear, if you take nothing else away, is that you create your own freedom, right? And it starts with imagining as clearly as you can what you truly want your life to look like, right? So it's really that simple to get started. And if you're not happy, you can change it. You're never ready, like
Yeah.
just go for it. Uh, and you know, as an example of one, as soon as I made that commitment to living a life with intention, it's been this continual path of the next thing unlocks, the next thing becomes clear, and at this point, I'm living the life of my dreams, and I continue to dream bigger. right? It's like, whoa, this is it. I wake up every day excited, inspired for life, even though I know there's gonna be hard stuff.
Yeah.
That maybe because I know at this point, right? It's like, and I'm building a thriving business, and um, I'm helping other people live their lives. I'm surrounded by joyful, loving relationships. Um, I'm traveling, I'm adventuring. It's it's incredible. So, um, and I also, as a result of that difficult time, eventually my marriage did fall apart. So, I'm not living this like idyllic, perfect life, or at least what I would have imagined would have been an idyllic and perfect life. So that's really what's so powerful about, what I bring to others is that no matter what situation you find yourself in, you can find a way to thrive and to rise above it, and to create what it is you truly desire most. So,
Yeah. Truly powerful stuff there, Nick. And to all, if you guys are out there watching it, I know Nick's video is going a little bit in and out. Like I said, he's in a van looking for a river, but we
that's
still
right.
we still got good audio, so we're gonna push on to the Ranger objective here. And I think it's a great segue, everything you just said there, to get your to get your definition of vulnerability.
Yeah, I love this question. I've listened to your show a few times, and hearing everybody's definition is so cool. It's really mind opening. So, I actually looked up the definition. That's
Yeah,
my engineering brain, right? I'm
that's what
like,
I did. That's what I did too.
what's, yeah, what's the collective understanding of this? And so, it's really, the short version is it's exposure to the possibility of being harmed, right? And I think, yeah, that feels about right. It's, and what I'm most interested in is like, what's the experience of vulnerability for most of us? And I think that there's something really powerful here, because to the degree that you're willing to live your life to the fullest is the degree that you're exposed to risk,
Right.
exposed. And I believe that all of life is vulnerable. There's really no, like, if you play it safe, you're in the comfort zone. It's not actually safe. There's no guarantees, no matter, how you're moving through this life. And what I have found is that actually the more that I expose myself to risk, the more vulnerable I get, the more reward that I reap, right? The more that I learn, the more rich this experience of life becomes. And so that's one way that I look at it, is like, how am I living my life? Am I putting myself out there? And in so doing, there is risk. And then when it comes to leading with vulnerability, I think, where this definition starts to open up is when you let down your guard, right? When you're just real. And that's kind of hard to define, but I think most people understand that. When you can be real with the people that you're building something with, there's a almost non-conscious connection that is formed, you know, um, and a bond that starts to build. That is really what it's all about in business,
Yeah.
in life, in love, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I think
that's my thoughts on
I
vulnerability.
think that's a great take and definition of vulnerability. Like you said, that like listening to other people's definitions is one of my favorite things about this whole
Yeah,
podcast, because everybody's got a little bit of different take, but it's all kind of the same in the same token, right? And they all kind of intertwine and go together. So let's go
yeah,
back a little bit to the 29-year-old, right? What led you to the military, and then inside of that to the 75th Ranger Regiment? What was it about that drew you into both of those organizations?
yeah, yeah. Well, I've always been a high achiever, so it's, for better or worse. Like I said, I had this deep admiration and respect for my grandfather, who had served in the Pacific Theater, World War II. My dad had a couple of buddies that were in Vietnam, and had an uncle that had been in Korea, and so there was a lot of this sort of military flair and culture, and stories that I had grown up around. And I think, I just ate up all the marketing around be the best you can be, right?
Mhm.
The few, the proud, the like, so I really appreciated all of that. And then I kind of put it aside. Timing was interesting, right? I was coming of age right when there was a big drawdown, so they weren't really looking for people. And then I got distracted making money and doing all this kind of stuff. So by the time I got to 28, 29 years old, it was like, okay, I either have to do this or just forget about it. But it was a really strong voice, that like, hey, serve, do your duty. And this idea of freedom is a big one for me. It's one of my top values. And at that time, I believed that, hey, joining the military is going to contribute to freedom in the world, freedom, in this country, helping to liberate people from oppression and all that kind of thing. So I really felt connected to that bigger purpose, and it was like go or no go, right? Go or forget about it. So I finally ended up joining. There were a few, really important coincidences that occurred. Right, I met a mutual friend of ours who was in regiment. I had had like some powerful conversations with coworkers who had been in Vietnam and Korea, and they were really encouraging me to, consider that path. And so I joined. And at the time, it was like I was just working and partying and playing in bands, and I was just kind of tired of that whole scene, right? So this felt like a really exciting thing that I could contribute to something meaningful. I could challenge myself, um, and Ranger Regiment just, of all those things that I was exposed to, I had heard about Rangers and I had seen the marketing and met our mutual friend and learned all about it. It felt like it really aligned with my desire to be around people who were excelling, right? The best of the best, um, not just out there, you know, just a bunch of grunts running around, right? It was
Right.
like this felt like there was some level of uh, exceptionalism. So yeah, so I joined with a Ranger contract, which was like, well, maybe you have a shot,
Right.
right? You got to prove yourself all along the way. Um, but that was really the setting for me at that time and why I chose regiment.
Yeah. So as you look back and kind of reflect on that time, what what do you take? What did the regiment mean to you during that? In the grand scheme of things, that 4 years is going to be a short blip in your life. But
Yeah,
if it's anything, even the 20 years I spent there will be a short blip in the overall scheme of my life. But I know it
yeah,
had a profound impact on me. Just what impact did that organization have on you?
yeah. Oh man, I mean, this is like probably a whole series of
Right.
podcasts,
Yeah.
right? This is questions, so I'll do my best to be succinct. Um, as far as the organization itself, um, man, it's an experience of it really was all those things I was hoping for. I was able to test myself completely. I found, new depths of resilience and strength uh, and leadership, and so the organization itself is very, very good at helping to craft you into a really effective leader, especially in the realm of war and combat. Uh, but a lot of things that I learned translate very well to being a leader in the civilian world. Um, of course, it's talked about a lot, but this bond that can almost be can't be explained, between members of regiment, and especially in a particular shared experience, right? Particularly combat or um, even different theaters of combat. So yeah, it really was a formative experience for me. It taught me the discipline that I had been lacking, and really showed me what was possible when you put your mind, your intention towards a higher purpose with a group of humans who are just all on the same path of excellence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely the people that make that place so
Yeah.
special to all of us
Oh
who
yeah.
have served there. Um, I'm sure there were there were some great days in regiment, some challenging days. When you look back, what was your most challenging day in the 75th that you still look back on and wish you could have done something different or wish there was a different outcome, or it's just one of those days that just kind of stick with you that leaves that bad taste in your mouth?
Well, there's a couple different ways to answer this. There's one, I, I was I was this high achiever, but with this kind of punk rock rebel streak,
Mm.
right? So, so it was like I was really good at my job, and then there were these times where I would just kind of, really have some friction. And one particular day that comes to mind, and then I want to talk about the one that's most impactful, but this one where it didn't quite fit, I really saw that clearly was in terms of like progressing, right? There was you're probably familiar with this. There's a form that you have to sign. It basically says, yeah, I'm going to forego the next rank. Um, and I felt like this was sort of my immaturity at the time, but also sort of a theme, and I'll get to that. But um, it felt like I was kind of being limited by the structure, by the hierarchy, right? By things that I had no control over. And that's one of the experiences I had where I was like, oh, this container's not quite big enough for me.
Right.
So, and that's sort of a theme as we're talking here, right? That's maybe unspoken, but moving from this realm of control to this realm of freedom, right? And so, for everything that was positive and all the things that I loved about Regiment and the way that it shaped me as a man that I really love, there were those clues that's like, maybe this isn't 100% it for you. And that's how life is, right? When we hit those walls and we feel that friction and that frustration. I see that now, that those are the clues. Like, okay, well, how, what can you shift? How can you grow? What's maybe a better fit? So that was a really important experience for me to have, and one of those days where I was just frustrated and angry. And and then in terms of, this obviously has nothing to do with regiment, right? But it was October 1st, 2009, when we lost Rob Sanchez on target. And it was a mass cal event, and I was 200 yards maybe away when the ID blast went off. And that was absolutely a transformational day for me, where I went from thinking that I was invincible, right? Like, I was one of the toughest guys on the planet. I was surrounded by some of the best soldiers and best warriors on the planet, and we just never failed to, holy crap, like, all of this is so fragile,
Right.
you know. And that was one of the biggest, actually one of the biggest moments of my life, really, where I shifted my perspective and my attitude from, hey, I got this, I'm good, I'm invincible, to wow, like, this is really a gift, every day to be alive, and I'm still going to strive to be the best that I can be in whatever I'm pursuing. And I have this understanding of, like, when it's up, it's up,
Yeah.
and so getting to the point where I can embrace that has been such a liberating journey, because it's almost an even bigger source of power when you're like, hey, I know this is all, gone in the blink of an eye, and I get to do whatever I can while I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And people sometimes wonder why I ask that question, and it's because I like to hear without prompt what got you through that hard time. Right? People always seem to
Yeah,
share what it was that kind of got them through, or it was a moment, it was a transitional moment in their life, right, for
yeah,
forever. And I think
yeah,
those hard days where we all had them, right? We
yeah,
all over the past 20 years, we all
yeah,
reflect on them, I think, and it's important for us to talk about them and share that we've all kind of been through that. But it's not all bad, right?
yeah,
You're not always
yeah.
losing guys on target. There's a going to the X
Right.
and doing stuff. What do you remember fondly? What was your best day in regiment?
Oh man. Okay. So I love this. I want to come back to it. I just want to put a fine point on what you just said, is
Yeah.
like, that's really important, right? So your worst day can be one of your greatest gifts.
Right.
That takes some doing to extract that, but it's easier than you think with with the right kind of guidance. Um, so yeah. So that has become one of my greatest gifts and strengths, and from that day. But to get back to your, um, yeah. Oh man, some of the best times in regiment. I'm trying to mentally sort through them in my mind. um, Man, there's so many. Being deployed, the guys say this, and I know a lot of people maybe struggle to understand this, but being deployed was absolutely the best time in general in regiment, right? Because you've trained so hard, you've worked so hard, you sacrificed so much to be at the point where you're doing what you're here to do, and then you're doing it, right? And everything just kind of like fades away. You've got this singular focus, um, and it's easier, right? There's less distractions. You're just there to do what you're there to do, and then when you're not on mission, you're going to the gym, you're spending time with your buddies, you're resting, um, it's just a very simple way of life, and it's so aligned with the purpose and the bigger meaning,
Yeah.
um, that yeah, it's awesome. And then even training, some of those days when you look back, maybe at the moment they don't feel like the best time, but looking back, you're like, man, it was so cool, just like hanging out, camping in the woods, shooting guns,
Yeah. Yeah.
and being together, um, with some outstanding humans.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I know. You hit the nail on the head there. It's not, it's, when you're in some of that stuff, like a team live fire in August on Fort Stewart, and it's
oh
112 with the heat index, it's not fun at the time, right?
yeah,
There's fun moments during it, but
yeah,
it hurts. But if I
yeah,
could go right now and lead a live fire, a team live fire right now, I'd go do it in a heartbeat because
hundred
I
percent.
know now looking back just how special every moment was the Ranger Ball night, the
Yeah,
just the time in the barracks
yeah,
around those people. I I tell we all heard it. Stop and smell the roses. We're terrible at
mhm,
it. I think as A
mhm,
typers, and
mhm,
that's what I tell most young guys now is like just enjoy the time that you're there.
yeah,
Find the joy in every moment because it's there. You just kind of have to hunt for it.
yeah.
But it's definitely a special place. But ultimately, you decided, you left the military. I was curious what kind of led to that decision. I think you spoke about it a little bit. You were just getting too big for that box potentially. Um,
Yeah.
um, do you ever regret that decision? Do you look back on it? How did your transition go initially, and then how do you reflect on it?
Yeah. I mean, I do look back now, especially, I'm 44 now, and I'm like, okay, well, I basically would have been around retirement age, even having started late.
Yeah,
So I sometimes imagine what that would look like. And I think I would probably be a lot more broken physically. So,
you would be. I can attest to that for sure.
yeah. Uh, so, yeah, when I got out, what was happening was, I had just had my first child. So, that was sort of the juxtaposition was, okay, I love what I do, and I had some really cool opportunities coming up, to move over to different sections in regiment, and I just gotten promoted, and so it was like, okay, I see this path over here, and it's exciting, and it includes being away from my family a lot,
Yeah,
and it includes some pretty high risk factors, because by now I had recognized that I'm not invincible, right? And so I knew I had the fallback of my degree, of my engineering career. And the biggest thing that made the decision for me was I wanted to be around to see my son grow up, and not just grow up broadly, but like be there for the moments. And I saw a lot of guys that had family, and they were struggling because they would go away and then come back, especially with really young kids. It was almost like they had to reintroduce themselves again to the kids, and I just thought that doesn't feel right for me. So yeah, so ultimately made the decision and chose to be around for the family and that adventure.
yeah. So that adventure, I mean, it led you to Cornell University,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
To get to receive your MBA. Just if you could just speak a little bit, how's a former punk rocker? Army Ranger, a go getter.
Yeah.
Find yourself at an Ivy League institution pursuing an MBA, and then what what did you take from your time in the 75th into that study program? The work ethic, problem solving,
Yeah.
communications, whatever it was. How did that work out for you?
Yeah, man. Well, it ended up working out perfectly, right? As everything in life does. And but that kind of in between when I got out and went for my MBA, there was about 4 years in between that, 3 or 4 years. So during that time, it was very hectic. A lot of like we were growing a family, right? I had 3 kids when I by the time I started the MBA. Still married. I was working full time, and I was struggling with the transition. Right, so physically, my body had just completely given up. There's a lot of pain and trying to figure that out. Um, I had, again trying to find my tribe and my people again. I had a lot of PTSD issues, and that's sort of what's swirling around. And in the meantime, I'm also feeling like disconnected from purpose. How do I reconnect to that? And I thought, well, the natural progression here is I've learned how to be a leader in regiment. Let me go be a leader in the corporate world. And so that process began, right? And it took a while. That's why it took so long, is because getting into an Ivy League MBA, especially, is a whole process, right? And it just takes time. So by the time I got accepted, I had put a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of money into getting to that point. And I was still kind of ignoring all of this other stuff that was starting to grow, and I'm trying to bury it down, but man, I'm running out of dirt to bury it with. Uh, so, I found myself at Cornell, which even to this day, I look back, I'm not really sure how I did that. I must have sold it pretty well. Uh, and it's kind of a theme, right? I've always looked at like, well, what's the biggest thing? What's the stretch? I'm gonna at least shoot for that.
Right.
Right? That's what got me into regiment, and that's what got me into Cornell. And um, and the whole way, I was never ready. I didn't quite feel like I belonged. Right, that imposter syndrome creeping in is one of the things that I help people with a lot. Right, because we all have it. It's always there. Every time you grow, every time you stretch yourself, you're going to experience that in some form again. But I, my head down, started grinding in the program, and slowly realized that, hey, I'm a really valuable member of this team for a lot of different reasons. Right, I bring a lot of things to bear, and it was a really incredible experience. Um, the things that regiment really helped me with was, it definitely was one of the first things that helped me feel confident that I belonged. Because I was like, hey, I've done this amazing thing. Maybe 4 other people in this whole program have done something similar. So I felt like, okay, that gives me a reason to stand here with some of these, frankly, like business titans, right? I mean, these were like vice presidents, CEOs. They had founded companies, um, and so that gave me sort of a sense of belonging. And then, yeah, in terms of work ethic, you know, um, problem solving, communication, it was all valuable from regiment to bring that. Like, there were times when in that program, it was an executive MBA program, so it was full time on the side.
Right.
Makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so I could work full time and I could go to this MBA full time. The program itself was the same length as the full time in on campus MBA. So we had a lot of work to do all the time, and there were sessions where you're just like grinding it out, and it's late night and you got deadlines coming, but the whole time it's like, yeah, but nobody's getting shot at, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna die here, probably, hopefully. Um, so we'll just get through it, and being able to look at those things tactically and be able to strategize and understand, hey, what's the most important thing for us to do? Um, Having that kind of, that pace model, which I think it's
Yeah.
talked about a lot on this show, of like, hey, our primary objective is to knock this out of the park, have this thing that's really valuable that who knows what we could actually turn it into. And as you go down the line, right, alternate contingency emergency, it's like emergency is D's get degrees,
Right.
right? So, uh, and I had a really cool moment with one of our professors when we first started out. He was like, "Look, you guys are here. You're all superstars. It's Cornell. It's this and that." And he goes, "But the truth is, success isn't getting on the honor roll. Success isn't being, the summa cum laude or whatever. Success is you make it through this program and you're still married and everybody still has a good relationship. You're healthy, right? It's like make sure you're staying focused on what really matters here."
Right. Right. Uh,
So
yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of like the Ranger School thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many times you recycled. It still the Ranger tab is still the 63-cent piece of material that you pick
exactly,
up. So I get it.
100%.
And we spoke, obviously we spoke before we did the podcast, and we talked a little bit about you entering the corporate world. And
Mhm.
there's things that come along with an MBA. I think is probably like the cape of expectation, right? You're supposed to go
Yeah,
into the corporate world and be successful and climb the corporate ladder and be a CEO, a COO, operations
yep,
manager. But you know, I think sometimes a lot of people I've talked to, the corporate world doesn't meet their expectation. It's a lot dirtier and ugly, and
yeah,
just not a place where a lot of high performers where we came from with morals and integrity and values. There's a lot of just places in the corporate world that don't meet that expectation of ours, and I think you had kind of that experience. I just like you
yeah.
to share your kind of your experience as you moved, farther into the corporate world after your MBA.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. It was definitely a case of mismatched expectations. Had this vision of myself as like, okay, now I'm this accomplished, accredited leader, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a difference. And and it was like, first of all, I was placed at a level that I thought, whoa, man, really? This is where you see me as being able to, have this kind of impact. So that was the first mismatched expectation. Then as I got into it, it was like having the expectation that it was going to be anything like the high performance group that I was in, with the degree of friendships, connection, meaning, excitement, was a terrible idea. It's not that, right? It's the corporate machine exists for largely to create profit for shareholders, to um, to maybe execute on certain tasks or produce certain products or services. But at the end of the day, it's it's largely, there are some exceptions, but it's largely missing that deeper purpose. It's missing that true focus on people,
Right.
right? The way that regiment is, and so yeah, it was pretty jarring, pretty shocking to get into that environment. And one thing they do require is a lot of effort and a lot of work, right? So it's very easy to get sucked into this rat race, this hamster wheel effect of like putting in a lot of work, putting in a lot of effort, and sort of misplacing or displacing what you're really after,
Yeah.
right? Which is that connection and that meaning, that sense of adventure and thrill. Um, so yeah, it very quickly drained my my energy, my excitement. It felt like, oh man, now I'm just kind of doing the same thing I was doing before in a slightly different role, and I've just sunk a lot of
Yeah.
time, energy, and money
Yeah.
into getting here. So so I think a lot of people get into that and they go, well, let me just get the next promotion, then I'll be able to make a difference. Oh, let me just, I'll just keep pushing, and in order to do that, I got to sacrifice a lot of life energy to get there, and sacrifice time with my family, and you know, in my experience and the people that I've talked to and my own experience, that's a trap.
Yeah.
Doesn't usually lead anywhere.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people that we know, when you leave the military, you think you're going to gain all this time, right? That the military took a lot of time from you with training events, and it took time and
Yeah,
deployments, and took time from your family. But then we've all seen it where that person, that high performer, goes into the corporate world, and they're actually that took takes more time from them, right? It's
that's right. Yeah.
They're spending more hours at the office than they've ever spent. They're bringing work home with them. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I know from my own experience, it's worse for my family when I'm around but not present,
Yeah.
right, than it was when I was deployed and not there at all, right? So,
Right. Right.
um, uh, with that in mind, if somebody, they're out there. There's a lot of former 75th, a lot of soft guys and gals in general that are out there doing really well and high level education, MBA programs,
Hmm.
executive leadership programs. What advice would you give them as they're heading into a corporate type environment, or just even if it's not corporate, even if they're just starting their own thing? What's
Hmm.
something that that they should watch out for do when they're before they make that leap into that field?
Man, yeah. So there's so many things and so many like pitfalls and tips that I'd love to share. And if anyone wants to connect and just kind of riff on that, I'm always happy to do that. The biggest thing is just don't expect to get the experience that you had in regiment or in any soft or related field. Don't expect to get that from corporate. And this is not a discussion about bashing corporate, right? There's a lot of good things about corporate. There's a lot of great organizations out there doing great things. Um, it's just in general that model can be really tricky to navigate. So, the couple things I would say. One is absolutely consider entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Absolutely consider that because I guarantee that you're well positioned for that. And so, if there's any desire to do that, explore that, see if that's possible for you. Um, the biggest thing, whether you're going into corporate or entrepreneurship, is get very clear on the life that you want. That's the biggest thing that I would tell anyone, but especially in this particular situation, just get really clear on what you want and keep that top of mind. Keep building that, keep referring to that because it's very easy to fall into this, kind of rat race, workaholic, overperformance trap when you don't have that vision of how you want your life to be. So
Yeah.
that's
I
that's the biggest
agree, and I think it's about expectations, right? And like you said, we're not
thing. Hmm.
sitting here bashing the corporates. There's a lot. The corporate they do a lot of things. They make all of this
Absolutely.
equipment that's sitting on my desk right now, enabling me and you to have this conversation, right?
That's right.
But I think sometimes that people only look at the sexy side, and a lot of times that's ones and zeros at the end of an offer
Yeah.
letter.
Hmm.
Just like the regiment. Awesome. We're talking about a lot of great stuff, a lot of great times we spent there, but we're not talking about the ammo details on Saturday morning and
Right.
those
Yeah.
early years when we had to
CQ
yeah,
for
the
24
CQ the
hours.
CQ
Yeah.
shift on Thanksgiving Day, or having
Hmm.
to burn poop overseas because
Yeah.
the facilities aren't working. Um
Right.
I think the biggest thing when I tell people, and I wonder your opinion on it, is you need to sit down, you need to write out your values. What are your
Hmm.
values? What are that company's or organization's values? Are they practicing those values, and do they align with yours? And that's one way
Hmm.
to hopefully help you be happy and
Hmm.
successful at the same time. You kind of have the same look at that.
Oh yeah, 100%. This is one of the most energizing things that I do with people too. Is yeah, get very clear on your values, and it's simpler than you think. A lot of people are like, I don't know what my values are. There's some cool stuff that you can do that's very quickly distill those. And then getting clear on like what are the peak experiences of your life because that'll give you a lot of clues about how you want to live your life moving forward. And then just yeah, build a get in your imagination and
Yeah.
build a mock-up of what you'd like it to look like in terms of your relationships, your finances, your personal life, or your physical fitness, all that kind of stuff. Um, and that's it's a really powerful tool for you to create the life that you want to create. And then yeah, if it's corporate, if it's entrepreneurship, you can play with how that fits in. But the biggest piece of advice is do it that way rather than like, okay, I'll get the job and then I'll fit my life into it.
Right. Right. I agree. So, to move forward a little bit, so you're a big advocate for mental health, and
Yeah.
you said the word that we all, or the acronym we all hate, the PTSD.
Yeah.
You've gone through those struggles.
Hmm.
How did you navigate some of those darker times, in your life, and come through it on the other side?
Yeah, it's going on over 10 years since I got out. And in that time, there's been a lot of ups and downs. I found myself with suicidal ideation a couple times when life got really challenging. Um, and I've been to therapy. So this, I feel like I've experienced pretty much the breadth um, of ups and downs, put it that way. And so some of the things that have helped me the most are just asking for help when I need it. Like just admit that there's a lot of great resources out there. Um, there's people there that can help and that are very skilled, right? So understand that, like, you don't have to figure it out all yourself. You don't have to do it all yourself. Um, and so those resources are out there. So use them. um, and it doesn't even have to be the perfect one, right? Because all these people are tend to be connected. So somebody's going to get you to where you need to be. And if you're at that point where you're like, man, I got nothing, right? I don't know what to do, then reach out to a hotline, reach out to a buddy, reach to anything you see online, these groups that are helping vets. Um, and then in general, some of the other things that have really helped me to thrive and stay out of some of those depths is life coaching. I've always got a coach on retainer. Uh, Therapy, EMDR was one of the effective therapies that I used when I was stuck in a pretty severe PTSD loop to help me kind of break that cycle and then be able to move forward. Um, how build meaningful relationships. It might seem like a daunting task now, but I would make that a priority and figure out what that means to you and figure out how to do that. There's, again, so many resources. I'm here to help if anybody needs that. Because in those some of those lowest moments when I lost the people that I thought were there for me, or my whole world turned upside down, I had friends that I reached out to, and I just said, "Hey, man, I think I'm done." And having that support and someone who understood what was going on and was able to hold space for that, um, made all the difference.
Yeah.
So those are some things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard. I think, I know from my transit when you transition out of the military, you can find yourself kind of on an island, right? You're out there
Hmm.
by yourself, and the hardest thing to do in the military or out of the military, I think, is to initiate movement. Is to make
Hmm.
that phone call, to ask for help, to reach out, and you know, people can always reach out to me, guys like you. Find somebody that
Yeah.
walk the same path that like you said, build a relationship with them and reach out because you can. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. And another unfortunate thing you fall into a bin or a category is a former soft guy that's divorced and has
Hmm.
kids, and that's another layer and another difficulty. But your divorce was after you transitioned, right? Yeah, which
Yeah.
which is a little bit rare. I say, well, I don't say it's rare. I see because of my placement and access. Most of the guys I saw were still in, but there's plenty of guys that did it on the other side. How did you kind of get through that, or continuing to get through that and build
Yeah.
relationships with your kids and so forth?
Yeah, yeah. This is another podcast series.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Right? And yeah, it was one of the most challenging experiences of my life. Certainly, right up there with October 1st, 2009 in Afghanistan. Right, it was. I thought, hey, this is it. Right, we're gonna do life together, and it really, looking back, it started with that experience of running headfirst into the rat race in corporate, and when I made that decision to live life with more intention, it had a lot to do with the fact I suddenly saw that my marriage was falling apart. And, we did what we could to kind of patch it together and see where we could take it. But ultimately, a few years later, uh, it did end. And it was so unexpected and so severe the way that it kind of rolled out that that was one of the experiences where I was at the bottom, right? And I just was like, this is it, my life's over.
Right.
um, And I had so much fear around like what that meant, right? All the stories that I was telling myself about what that meant. I was, I had failed as a husband, I had failed as a father, you know, life was now ruined because it was never going to be what I thought that it was going to be. And I'm not going to be able to see my kids every day and kind of stuff. And so it really was this intense spiral downward. Um, so I understand the depths of despair that that type of situation can bring you to. And for that, I'm very grateful now because I can relate. If anyone is at that point, uh, I can very powerfully stand in that space with them, and so for that, I'm grateful. Um, it it forced me to shed all kinds of beliefs, all kinds of shoulds about what it means to be a father, what it means to be a partner, what it means. Now, um, yeah. So all of that had to be shed, right? I had to basically redefine all of that, and that is a huge challenge. Again, I had a lot of support. I had people coaching me through that. I had my faith got a lot stronger. And that's the beauty of all these challenges is that, like we talked about earlier, some of the most memorable moments, the ones you end up appreciating the most, were some of the most challenging. That in the moment you were like, "This sucks."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm really grateful that I'm at the point in my journey where I'm able to very quickly turn things around and see, okay, what's the gift, what's my growth opportunity, how can I move through this in a way that's really aligned with what I want, what do I really want. And so ultimately I had to get to a point where I realized in this in this divorce situation that I had to make a choice. I could either stay at war, right, stay in this energy of violence and despair and all that kind of stuff, or I could move towards what I wanted, which was freedom, love, peace, right, play. That's what I really adventure. This is what I really wanted. So once I was able to understand that and that I had a choice, I started to move in the direction of that. And the coolest thing that's happened is that I'm able to actually access and direct love to my ex-wife.
Hmm.
And that shift has changed everything, right? We now have this thriving co-parenting relationship, great relationships with the kids. It was it was the thing that has, and this is, to the point, like, how do you cope? It is totally possible, again, no matter what life gives you, to turn it into something that works for you, that is thriving, that is like actually supporting you live the life that you want to live. Right? You can't go back. You can't. There's so many things in life you can't control. You can't change. So don't get stuck there. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. You know, as soon as you can, pull yourself up out of that victimhood and into something more empowering. And so I was able to actually access that, be in that energy of love, and it looks different. That's just the reality. It looks different than what I expected it was going to look like, and I'm continuing to find ways to connect with the kids. And we're, because we're in this loving co-parenting relationship, there's so many other creative possibilities that we see, for visiting, for vacationing, for, you know, creating a thriving environment for the kids, which is ultimately the goal,
Right.
right? We're still in business. We're still in business. If we didn't have kids, probably be a totally different thing. We'd probably still be really healthy to, get to that point of love and forgiveness. Uh, and with kids, especially, super important. We need to be as high performance of a team as we can be to create the most abundant, thriving environment for the kids.
Yeah.
And it's just, we just got to get creative because it's different, and a lot of, this hasn't really been created before in this way.
Right.
Not a lot of examples of that.
Right.
So,
Um, if I look at you, on paper, you got a lot of education, right? Ivy League, MBA, successful in soft, successful on the other side. But you've spoke a few times about how important coaching and mentorship is, and some people would be like, why does this person need a coach
mm,
or need a
mm.
mentor? I'm a huge advocate for mentorship, in all phases of your life and coaching. What is that kind of? Why is it important?
Yeah, I will never not have a coach, right, or a mentor, or yeah, I totally agree with you. I like to have multiple perspectives, and I'm willing to invest significant amounts of my own earnings to have that because it creates a different experience of life, right? Somebody else is an expert. Somebody else has experience. Somebody else knows how to move through this and how to guide others through it, right? That's the important thing. Um, And when you find somebody who's a good fit with you, um, personality wise, energetically, vision wise, kind of stuff, you can move so much more effectively, so much quicker towards your goals, towards your dream life. Um, when those difficult things happen, you've got a partner, somebody who really cares, who's unbiased, other than maybe being biased for your success, right?
Right.
Who's going to help you look at that and help you just see the different angles and see the different approaches, um, and support you and celebrate you along the way. And I just can't imagine living life in isolation. I can't imagine trying to do it all myself now. And a lot of people are doing that, right? So it's it's just been so powerful to see what's possible when you have that skilled guide or mentor.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it yourself, and especially if you've got like really big dreams, right? You really want to create something amazing. You really want to have an impact. You want to leave a legacy. It's like don't try to go that alone.
Right.
It's it's going to be a really big challenge and big burden,
Yes.
and a lot of people just get burnt out and stuck because they're trying to do it all themselves. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, as we kind of bring it around and land the plane here on this podcast and this, I think, very amazing conversation.
it's been great.
What are you doing now? I know I
Yeah,
got it in quotations here, living with intention, right? Well,
yeah,
why are you driving across the country in a van? Or just like, what's life got for you
yeah.
now? What are you up to nowadays?
Yeah, I love this. We're coming full circle to the van down by the river, right?
Right.
This has been a dream that's been taking shape for a number of years, and um, once I got clear, and this was a few years ago, I got clear on my values, right? Freedom, adventure, peace, love, play, right? Those are my guiding light, really, for what I'm doing. And so, living with intention means, okay, is this decision aligned with those values, right? Is this opportunity aligned with that? And I've had a lot of different opportunities, right? Things that might pull me off course in all realms of my life, right? All environments of my life. And it's been really helpful because I'm committed to living with intention, because I know what those guiding values are. When I feel myself getting pulled too far off, I go, oh, okay, I get it, right? Something's not aligned. I don't think this is it. And so it's been really helpful to move very quickly to creating this incredible life for myself. And again, it's not perfect, but living with intention just means like, yeah, making those decisions related to those values, and getting better and better at knowing what it feels like. Right? We've got some incredible technology in this human body, and most of us are only using 10 to 20% of it. But one of the most powerful things that we can do is develop our intuition, right? Develop our sense of what is my body telling me. What does this feel like? Does this feel right? People talk about heart, gut. It's all interchangeable. So living a life with intention for me means like making those choices that are aligned. I do that by like getting out there, experiencing things, experimenting with different things. How does it feel? Does it, and just being really aware the whole time, observing um, my progress as I'm moving down the path. So for me, you know, I love outdoor adventure. I love being out in the world. I love connecting with people in person, and just kind of exploring everything that life has to offer from a mental, physical, spiritual sense. So I'm exploring all these realms. I'm going deep into my spirituality and kind of even into the metaphysical world. What kind of adventures are available there that feel good. Um, the physical world. I'm on a program now that's getting me back physically to where I'm actually able to reclaim my identity as an athlete, after being pretty broken for a long time and pretty down about that. Um, I'm traveling, I'm exploring where is next for me. A lot of these major disruptions, these life explosions, have led to a new degree of freedom, and so I'm kind of exploring where feels good to maybe plant my feet for a while next. Um, I'm being invited to these opportunities that are more and more aligned now. So, there's a cool thing happening where I might be taking over leadership of a leadership company. And I'm creating these transformational adventures where we take leaders out, individuals and teams, out into the wilderness. We spend a few days out there. We do intentional transformational work. So it's just really cool, like to be able to play in all these areas, and it feels in general pretty effortless,
Yeah.
right? A lot of ease, a lot of flow, um, and it's all aligned to that larger mission, right, of waging peace in the world,
Yeah.
uplifting humanity.
Yeah.
So
Awesome stuff, Nick. Last question I ask almost everybody on here. If you could go back and talk to your 19-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you'd give him?
I think I'd have to sit down for a while and talk to that guy.
Yeah.
The- I think the biggest piece of advice I would say is just relax. Just relax, man. Just keep doing what you're doing, and know that it's it's part of a bigger thing that's unfolding.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. Simple but very powerful, I think, right?
yeah, yeah,
Thanks for coming on here. Thanks for sharing. Very,
yeah.
very pourful stuff. I know is going to resonate with at least one person. That's all that matters, right? The
Awesome. Yeah, that's
make
it.
make a domino fall, and then they'll all start falling. So
That's right.
thanks for your time. Best of luck on your adventures. Hope the van doesn't break down, right?
Yeah,
And everything goes well. For everybody out there
thanks,
listening and
brother.
watching, do all that stuff. Like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see everybody on the next episode. Thanks again, Nick. This was
Yeah,
awesome.
appreciate you, brother. Talk to you soon.